The seasons are on the line for the Maple Leafs and the Jets, and is the Steven Stamkos, Jon Cooper era over in Tampa Bay? Hey everyone, welcome to Off the Post. Rob Wong, joined alongside by Toronto Sun sports columnist Steve Simmons and Postmedia hockey columnist Bruce Garrioch. And guys, it's full-on panic mode right now in two Canadian NHL cities. The Maple Leafs and Jets both trailing their respective series 3-1, heading into Tuesday night's action. Steve, we'll start with the Leafs. I know the series isn't over yet, but it's hard not to think about what's going to happen with the future of the core four if they do go out in the first round to Boston. Could we be seeing the end of this version of the Leafs on and off the ice?
Well, if they're going down in 5 games, I think you're going to see changes. And I think you're going to see changes on the roster, and I think you're going to see changes in the front office and coaching. And I think if they lose in Game 5 in Boston, I think Sheldon Keefe will get fired. I don't know what the status of team president Brendan Shanahan is. He's been on the job 10 years, and there's a new CEO at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. And so, the question is, would the new CEO, want Shanahan to be his guy in charge of the Leafs after 10 years of very good regular season teams and very questionable playoff teams? So there's a lot of questions to be answered here. The challenge is, and the big challenge is, the roster. How do you change a roster when you're tied in with so much money to so few people, and then you've got Mitch Marner up for contract in another year, and you've got no movement clauses for all of your core 4 players? And so to make the kind of changes they need to do a whole lot of arm twisting and a whole lot of convincing of people who have no movement clauses and will have to put up with a move in the summer, I presume.
It's interesting, Steve. One of the things that I've been told about Keith Pelley is that he doesn't suffer fools lightly, and I think it would be foolish to keep a president around who has won one playoff series in 10 years. And with an unlimited budget. And I think that if the Leafs lose tonight, I think tomorrow morning or in the next 48 hours, you'll be summoned to a press conference where you'll see the firing of Brendan Shanahan, and I also think you'll see the firing of Sheldon Keefe. And it doesn't mean both aren't good at what they do, but it just means that what they did in Toronto wasn't good enough. I think Brad Treliving will probably be given another shot because he's only been on the job 1 year. But I think after 10 years and one playoff round win, that's enough. And really a cash. They have an ATM, right? They run their business on an ATM, and what they've done is just not good enough.
Well, the amazing thing to me, Bruce, is it is good enough from Game 1 to Game 82. They have the 3rd best record in the NHL in the Austin Matthews era. They're the leading scoring team in the NHL in the Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, Willie Nylander era. It just doesn't translate to playoff hockey, and it hasn't translated to playoff success. They are, I think, the 19th highest scoring team in playoffs. So you've got 21 goals scored in the last 11 playoff teams for the highest scoring team in the Eastern Conference this season. Whatever they do in those 82 regular season games doesn't translate to what we know as playoff hockey, and that has to change more than anything else here.
Well, and you know what upset me the most, and I'd certainly take the C off his chest at the end of this series, is John Tavares taking a penalty in a 2-1 game when you're down, or whatever the score was, Saturday night, when you're down by a goal and your captain takes a penalty in the final minute. Enough's enough. Give the seat to Austin Matthews. Put it where it should be now. It's time for Austin Matthews to take charge of this group. And it's time, and you can use the excuse of a change of coach as the opportunity to change your leadership group as well, Steve.
Meanwhile, the Jets also facing elimination against the Avs, Bruce, and this is a team that made some big roster moves last offseason and decided to sign Connor Hellebuyck and Mark Scheifele to long-term deals. Is there more overhaul needed this offseason if the Jets go out?
It's interesting. Something is wrong there, and I don't believe it's coaching. Terry Murray got in trouble, Steve. You and I are both old enough to remember this, in the Stanley Cup final when he was coaching the Philadelphia Flyers. Who were they playing against?
I think they were playing
the final or the playoffs?
They played Detroit. They were playing Detroit.
Yeah, and he said, I think what we have here is a choking situation. And I think what we're seeing between the Philadelphia Fly or the Colorado Avalanche and the Winnipeg Jets is what Terry Murray would have called a choking situation. I don't think this is coaching. I think there's something wrong with that roster. And I think at a big time, the players just aren't stepping up, Steve.
Well, I'm going to go back to the example you made because it's a great one. And that Detroit Red Wings team was hard to play and hard to beat. And guess what?
Yeah.
The Colorado Avalanche are playing at a speed in the playoffs that no one else is matching. Like watching these guys, it's incredible to watch this team play. They play a different style of hockey, a different game of hockey than anybody else. Yeah, the Jets aren't good enough. And yeah, the Jets can't keep up. And yeah, the best goalie in the NHL, the Vezina, he'll win the Vezina Trophy, Hellebuck. They've been lighting him up for 5 a night. That's how great. So Winnipeg can be doing everything it's doing. The opponent right now is that good. And in this case, I think tip your hat to the Colorado Avalanche and let the Jets, they got a bad draw in the first round of the playoffs against a team that I'm not sure anybody, at this stage will be able to beat.
I know it's overused, but I think what you're saying, Steve, is they're playing with the heart of a champion, really, and they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Avs have been remarkable so far in this series. Lastly, the Lightning were eliminated by the Panthers. Now looking toward the offseason, Steve, team captain, Steven Stamkos is an unrestricted free agent. And of course, maybe Jon Cooper's status is up in the air here. But what do you think the future holds for both men in South Florida?
Well, you start with Jon Cooper, I think. And unless Julien Brisebois, the general manager, has lost his mind, tell me where you're going to find a better coach. Like, there might be 2 in the NHL if there are 2, and I'm not sure there are. But that's the guy. He's won 2 Stanley Cups. He's been to 4 Stanley Cup finals. Just they had an incredible run. Won every other league he's been in. Maybe time to get a different voice, but I don't know where you're going to find a better coach. So begin with that. The trouble with Stamkos, and it's not Stamkos that's the trouble. It's salary cap that's the trouble. They have a bunch of guys signed. Kucherov and Vasilevsky and Hedman and Point and Sergachev, all long term. What do they do with Stamkos now? He's going to be 35, and how do you approach that? And you approach it short term, and at what money? Because you can't give him the money he had before. You can't afford to pay him that, even though he's scoring 40 a year. And you know what? When you're playing with Kucherov, who passes the puck better than anybody in hockey, that 40 might translate to 31 somewhere else. So I think Stamkos is worth more in the open market than he is to Tampa Bay. But Tampa Bay needs to kind of fix their hockey team and add some parts in the middle of that roster. And the only way they can afford to do that is to bring Stamkos' salary down. Whether he's willing to accept that or not, we'll get the answer to that in the months to come.
Well, and it's interesting, Steve. I'm like you on Cooper. I think we just agree. I think they'd be crazy to move on from him. In fact, I'd hire him to an extension. I know coaches have a shelf life, but I think he's just fine where he is. As far as Stamkos goes, I mean, ultimately, I think this time it's on Steven Stamkos to decide: does he want more money, or does he want to stay and be a legacy player in one franchise throughout his career? And I think that's a decision that he has to make. To do that, he's going to have to take less money. That's right. Money is ego, I know. I guess the other question he has to ask himself is, how much money does he need?
In the pre-salary cap days, general managers like Harry Sinden and Jimmy Devellano, a lot of guys, they would take their legacy player and they'd say, okay, no one will make more than Raymond Bourque here. No one will make more than Martin Brodeur in New Jersey. No one will make more than Lidstrom in Detroit. Well, you can't do that anymore, unfortunately. But they've got Kucherov and Vasilevsky and Sergachev, I think, or not Sergachev, and Point at 9.5 million a year. And they get the break in Florida, of course, because they don't have state taxes. So that 9.5 translates to more money than it's probably 11 somewhere else. But it's still a question now of what will Steven Stamkos accept? He's 8'5" now. Is 5 the number? Is 6 the number? What works for Tampa so they can sign him? But they have to fill out. When they were winning, that middle of the roster with Yanni Gourde and Gaudreau and Coleman and those guys really was hard to play against. They need to get back to that. Their first line is good enough. Is the rest of the team good enough? And is their defense good enough? Because I think their goaltending will get back to being what it was in the past too. So they're not far away from being pretty good again, but it's a question of how do you use your money, where do you spend it, and what do you do with it?
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting conversation that the Lightning will have about Steven Stamkos. What do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. For Steve Simmons and Bruce Garrioch, I'm Rob Wong. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.